Welcome to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, or NCDPI, World Language Best Practices Series webinar. This webinar is on Wednesday, December 11th, 2019, from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. The focus of our World Language Best Practices series this year is our Administrator Guides for World Languages. Here you see the 3 Administrator Guides we have. These are instructional toolkit components for our North Carolina World Language Essential Standards, our state standards. These were developed as a way to communicate to administrators, particularly administrators like principals who do classroom observation, about our state standards and what to expect in a proficiency-based world language classroom, regardless of what type of program it is. Within our K-12 state standards, we do have 3 different types of programs outlined. The first is classical languages. Those are language programs where Latin or ancient Greek or other languages like that are taught. The second is dual and heritage languages, and that's 2 types of programs. One is dual language immersion or DLI programs, where content is being taught in a language other than English. And so we have a variety of those types of programs across the state that start usually in kindergarten and go up through 12th grade. The other type of dual and heritage language program are what's called heritage language courses. These used to be called native speaker courses or Spanish for native speaker courses. They're considered heritage language courses because they are designed to help native speakers or heritage speakers who come from like DLI programs or a strong background, maybe a family background with a language, to develop literacy skills in the language. And it might be Spanish or it might be other languages as well, so that they can join their native English-speaking peers in a higher level course as they continue on and build proficiency in the language. And then finally, we have modern languages, and modern languages are when a language is being taught as a separate subject. That's what we're here to focus on today, is our modern language programs, and those can be K-12, and we have 3 different types of languages: alphabetic, logographic, and visual, that are outlined in our standards, so that our standards are flexible enough to support any local decision about what type of language program a school or district wants to have. Today's agenda is coming up, as well as information about me as your presenter. I've said before, my name is Anne Marie Gunter. I am your World Languages Consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I work K-12. And today we're going to have our welcome and focus on the Administrator Guide for Modern Language Programs, as I just mentioned. As you might have seen already, we had one of these webinars from this series earlier in the year, and that one was kind of to do an overview of our Administrator Guides and to get feedback about what kind of information we needed on the Administrator Guides to really use them as best practice tools. And so I'm starting with our modern language programs, just so we can get going on our series. Based on the feedback we got last time that we had a webinar from this, we're going to emphasize several components of our Administrator Guide for Modern Language Programs. Specifically, we're going to look at the description and exit proficiency expectations, and feedback said that our school counselors really need that information. We're also going to look at in the modern language classroom section that talks about what to expect when you walk into a modern language classroom, because feedback said that our principals and teacher supervisors might be others who evaluate teachers who aren't necessarily a principal, but maybe a department head or a coordinator of some kind, that they really needed that information to make sure they were looking for the right things when they did their evaluations and observations of teachers. And finally, the appropriate expectations component of our Administrator Guides is something that feedback said all educators needed more information on. So we're going to spend time today looking at what needed emphasis according to our feedback for modern languages. And then after that, talk about creating a professional development or PD activity and choosing a classroom video to use with our NCDPI Standards Administrator Feedback Tool. Some of you probably already know that with our Administrator Guides, the last 2 pages of that guide is in fact a tool aligned to our NCDPI standards, the North Carolina Educator Evaluation System standards, that all teachers are evaluated on by their supervisor. And so we have created a way to tie best practices in world language education with that tool. And so we're going to talk about creating a professional development activity to use that tool better and more effectively. And finally, we'll end our time together today with some reminders and resources of things that you can use for your classrooms. So let's get started. Our focus and emphasis on the Modern Language Programs Administrator Guide starts now. As I said, this is a handout in our control panel, so I'll give you a moment to go ahead and download that if you have not. It is something that should be, hopefully, clearly visible on your control panel. And you just click into the handout section and you should see a PDF document. Once you click on that, it should open automatically for you. Of course, our administrator guides are posted online in several places on our website, including their own page that gives a detailed explanation of them. They are considered part of our instructional toolkit with our standards, so they're also available linked from our standards page on the website and taking you directly to that as one of our program resources. So as we get started with our Modern Language Programs Administrator Guide, I wanted to ask you a couple of things so that I know who you are as an audience and maybe what you're looking for today. First of all, I want you to talk about what is your current role with K-12 modern language programs. Remember, modern language programs are those that teach a language as a separate subject that is learned. So are you a teacher, a school counselor, a principal or teacher supervisor, a curriculum coordinator for a district or a school, or some other kind of stakeholder, maybe a colleague, a higher education instructor, a parent, a school board member, something like that? So once again, I'll go ahead and do our poll feature, and you can tell me what your current role is with K-12 modern language programs. This is once again a check all that apply. Let's go ahead and take 10 more seconds to finish up. All right, thank you for voting. I'll go ahead and close our poll and then share the results. Well, it looks like an overwhelming majority are teachers. 89% of you said you are currently in a teaching role. Another 19% said you're another kind of stakeholder, a colleague, a parent in higher education, that kind of thing. And a few people said you're a curriculum coordinator for a district or school. So that's great, quite a variety. I'm not surprised that we don't necessarily have any school counselors or principals or teacher supervisors with us this evening, but this is the kind of information you may want to share specifically with them. One of the reasons we created the administrator guides for world language programs is so that we could better educate those around us as world language teachers who work with us in scheduling our students, like school counselors often do, or helping students understand what sequence of courses they can take to move to things like honors level, AP courses, or even to earn our state seal of biliteracy. We also wanted to educate principals or others who observe us so that they know what they should be looking for when they go into a proficiency-based world language classroom, and also how to give us better feedback as world language educators in what we do. Many times, if you're like me at least, you've had supervisors who were very good educators, but didn't necessarily come from a world language education teaching background. And that's okay. We can always educate them about our best practices. All right, so also let's drill down and ask, which modern language programs are you currently involved with where this information could be used? Once again, this is a check all that apply. So are you involved with K-8 courses, either elementary or middle school or some combination, in any language that's taught as a modern language? Are you involved with high school level or high school credit courses 1 through 8 in alphabetic languages? Are you involved with high school levels 1 through 8 in logographic languages like Chinese or Japanese? Or are you involved with high school levels 1 through 8 in a visual language like American Sign Language? And I also included an other. you might be involved with classical language programs or dual and heritage language programs, and I wanted you to be able to indicate that as well. So let's go ahead and launch that poll. Which modern language programs are you currently involved with where the information we're about to talk about could be used? See, we're getting faster at voting, so let's take another 10 seconds to get our answers in. All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and share the responses so that you know. It looks like 76% of you are involved with high school levels 1 through 8 in alphabetic languages, another 11% in high school levels 1 through 8 in logographic languages, and 3% in high school levels 1 through 8 in visual languages like ASL. That makes sense too, because when we think about enrollment information, it is in fact our high school credit courses in modern languages that have the highest enrollment statewide. However, we also have over 20% of you who are involved with K-8 courses in any language as a modern language, and also another 24%, almost the same number, who are involved with other programs like classical language programs or dual and heritage language programs. So that's quite a variety this afternoon, and I hope you'll learn something in general that you can apply to all of the situations where you work with in your role. So let's get started. When we did the first overview webinar, there was a lot of discussion about how school counselors need to know more about the description that's actually in our standards and thus in our administrator guide for modern language programs about these programs. So you see there in the bottom right-hand corner, just a quick screenshot of that. But I wanted to emphasize to you, when you're working with your school counselors or others about modern language programs, remember that modern language programs involve the study of languages that are first language for a population somewhere in the world. So someone speaks the language that you're studying as a modern language as their first language or their native language or their home language in general. So that's one thing that certainly defines that. This also means that it includes all languages that any human population speaks as their first language and as their daily language of communication. So we commonly think of those, of course, as Spanish and French and Chinese, but it also includes languages like Cherokee and Greek and ASL, American Sign Language. Even though those are less commonly taught languages here in North Carolina, they are certainly very much modern languages. When we think about modern languages, the most common type of program, and what comes to mind when world language or foreign language classes are mentioned, are in fact modern languages. Most times our school counselors and other educators, our principals, our teacher supervisors, even stakeholders like parents, are most familiar with modern language programs. They may have called them foreign languages prior to this or something like that. But this is the most common type of program by enrollment. And like I said, what usually comes to mind when we think about world language classes or programs. North Carolina currently has 16 modern languages that are being taught. We are a local control state, so that means that our districts and charter schools and others are choosing 16 different modern languages. You can see all the information about our languages on the World Languages North Carolina document, the latest one, which is posted on our website on the landing page. And the landing page, of course, is at bit.ly/NCDPIWL. Now, some of you are probably wondering for a moment, well, wait a minute, didn't you say before in previous presentations that we have 18 languages in North Carolina? And in fact, we do, but only 16 of them are modern languages or someone's first language somewhere in the world, because we also have 2 classical languages, Latin and Ancient Greek, which are categorized that way. So 16 modern languages so far. And please know that additional modern languages can be added at any time and would use the same standards as our modern languages because we have differentiated between alphabetic, logographic, and visual languages. So we're very flexible with the standards, and a local community can choose the language they think is most helpful for their setting, and then offer that anywhere K-12. We have all of the structure ready in the state standards for any language. Another thing that feedback showed was that our school counselors really need to know about our exit proficiency expectations. So here you see a screenshot of our modern language exit proficiency expectations, specifically for alphabetic languages that are for high school credit. So those levels 1 through 8 for high school credit. This is what's in our administrator guide because, again, this is the most common one for modern language programs. And you can see that we have it outlined by mode and skill, keeping in mind that our proficiency builds over time and across different skill areas at different rates for a variety of reasons. So that's the screenshot from our administrator guide. When we drill down on that and really think carefully, though, we also need to remember that our exit proficiency expectations are designed to be, first of all, challenging yet reasonable. We want to put a challenge out there for our teachers to help their students grow to a certain proficiency level, but we also want them to be reasonable. These expectations or student outcomes are adjusted for things like instructional time that's allotted. So if you teach, let's say, in a high school or a middle school that uses a traditional schedule where you meet 45 minutes per day throughout the year, that's instructional time adds up, as does being on a block schedule where you meet 90 minutes, let's say, per day, but only for a single semester as you're taking class. Of course, that instructional time usually applies to all subject areas, but is certainly something we need to think carefully about with world languages and building proficiency. Our expectations are also adjusted for developmental levels. So for example, if you're teaching high school students a language, you know that they already know how to read and write in their first language, which is usually English. That means that you can help them transfer those skills quickly to the language that they're learning, whether that's an alphabetic language like English is, a logographic one, or a visual one. However, if you're teaching kindergartners a language, they have not yet developed reading and writing skills that can be transferred like that, so the expectations for them are a bit different. Also, the expectations are adjusted for previous language and literacy proficiency. So if a student has already had exposure, let's say in the elementary or middle school, then those expectations are adjusted a bit so that students can be placed correctly and continue to build their proficiency with those exit proficiency expectations. Also, we do have exit proficiency expectations for all 4 standards, including number 4, culture. I know that culture isn't specific here on our chart, but in our standards, of course, we do have student outcomes based on proficiency for culture, our 4th standard. And our exit proficiency expectations are designed based on research from second language acquisition studies, K-12 student outcomes specifically over time, and also in thinking about articulation across a sequence and into post-secondary study or work. So we want to think carefully about how does a student's language develop over time? What are reasonable outcomes for that? And how can we make sure that we focus on an articulated sequence of instruction so that students continue to build proficiency and then are ready to either continue studying the language at the post-secondary level or to use the language in their work or career after they leave high school. Also remember that there are exit proficiency expectations for all K-12 programs, including the other modern language programs. So we do have a chart like you see on the administrator guide specifically for logographic languages for high school credit. We have one for visual languages for high school credit. And we have one for K-8, which is either FLES, foreign language in the elementary school in K-5, and beginning or continuing in middle school. So all of those are available. If you want to see those additional charts, they are in the World Language Essential Standards in the Modern Languages section on pages 11 through 14. And of course, our standards are always posted on the World Languages Google site on the Standards tab. So if you want to access those, you can see them, especially if you want to help school counselors or principals really focus in on what that should be, particularly in regards to placement of students so that they continue to build their proficiency. So let's move on to some of the other questions that came back in feedback. Also in the administrator guide, there were people who wanted to know more about the In the Modern Language Classroom section of that and how they might share that. with school counselors and specifically principals and teacher supervisors. So this is a short section. I'm going to break it down and sort of emphasize what's in each paragraph or section. And the first one is information about our North Carolina World Language Essential Standards in action. And specifically, it talks about teachers planning with the clarifying objectives and proficiency outcomes from our standards. It talks about students showing their performance of the functional language skills they're building. So students actually using the language and demonstrating what they know and are able to do. And finally, it talks about using assessment both formatively and summatively. Formatively in the classroom to adjust instruction and set goals and so forth, and summatively to measure or assess, evaluate what students have learned as you continue on in your curriculum. And the second part about in the modern language classroom, the emphasis is on our ACTFL statement, ACTFL being the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, our national professional organization, and how the focus is on teachers and students using the target language 90% or more of the time in the classroom. Now, this may be a significant shift for our principals and teacher supervisors because likely when they learn language, it was not in a proficiency focused on communication. And so we want to make sure that they understand that when they walk into a world language classroom, they should be hearing and seeing the language 90% of the time or more from both teachers and students. This is critical, and this is one of those best practices in particular that we look carefully at. It's also included in those NCDPI standards toolkit that's part of the administrator guide. Also, another component that's focused here is on using technology tools in the world language classroom in a way that incorporates them to enhance learning and to assess performance. So not using technology just for the sake of technology, but using it in fact to enhance learning, for example, maybe accessing authentic materials and resources that are available online, or to assess performance. So particularly when we think about recording, someone performing the language, maybe speaking or signing, there's a lot of tools online and even free technology tools that we can use to do that so that we can assess performance appropriately. And finally, in the modern language classroom, observers should be seeing activities and assessments that include the 3 modes of communication and culture, which are our 4 state standards. You remember, of course, that standard number 1 is interpersonal communication, and that's the informal day-to-day communication you do where you just speak quickly with someone or maybe text someone or something like that. There's also interpretive communication, which is reading, listening, and also viewing. There's presentational communication, which is formal speaking and writing. I always think of presentational communication as being something you rehearse or draft. And then finally, standard number 4 is culture. And so again, when you're in a modern language classroom, you should be seeing activities and assessments that include those 3 modes of communication and culture, which covers our 4 standards. And finally, one of the things that feedback said all educators needed to know more about when it came to our administrator guides was appropriate expectations. And so here you see on the right-hand side information right from the administrator guide, a screenshot of the appropriate expectations and what's there. But really what this boils down to is what should students know and be able to do with language after a particular period of time? And so some of the examples in the administrator guide are actually, after level 2 in high school, let's say, which is often the level at which students meet the UNC minimum admissions requirement, or after level 4 in high school, which if students complete it successfully can qualify them to earn the Global Languages Endorsement, our state's seal of biliteracy. Or maybe it's after a K-5 FLES program. And so there's a focus on what it takes to build proficiency in lower levels like in K-5 or middle school and how that should look. Also in the appropriate expectations component, there's a real focus on building proficiency in a language and how it takes time and practice, just like, for example, other types of subjects like math. Over time, students practice and work and build their skills, and language proficiency works the same way. So there's this brief information, and then when people like administrators, principals, school counselors, other folks ask, well, what do we know more about appropriate expectations? One of the things we've done is we have posted some additional materials that we use with our North Carolina standards to help people understand that. And so I've got a screenshot here, and we'll take a quick look at this online. But basically, we're looking at materials like from ACTFL, like I said, our National Professional Organization, I mentioned them before, and looking at performance descriptors for language learners, looking at the proficiency guidelines, which are very detailed outlines of what the different levels of proficiency and even sub-levels look like, the successful ACTFL can-do statements, and then there's a great poster that I'm going to show you here in a minute, if you haven't already seen it, about oral proficiency levels in the workplace. And so we have those. We also have the ones on the right, the external tools and national standards, that are different types of tools you can use to help people understand expectations in a world language classroom in a proficiency-based learning environment, which is what we're looking at. Notice that we have on those external tools a variety of things, including 21st century skills map information, the ACTFL World Readiness Standards that covers all languages, so alphabetic, logographic, visual, and so on. The standards for classical language learning from their national organization to focus on Latin and ancient Greek, and also the standards for learning from American Sign Language from their national organization. So I'm going to click out real quickly to our website. This is our bit.ly link like you've seen before. And notice that when we get out to the web page, it's coming up on the screen, we have two places we can go. Right in the middle, there's a section about standards. You can see here, I'm kind of highlighting there in the middle. And then also in the upper right-hand corner, the links to our different tabs are always up there as well. So whether I click on the standards one there or the standards one up above, it takes me to the same place. All of our standards materials and instructional toolkit components are here. So you see the information that you've probably seen before. We also have curriculum writing resources, formative assessment tools, and program resources. Remember I mentioned before the administrator guides are program resources, and they're linked there, that whole page about administrator guides if you need it. And then this is the information about these additional materials that can really help with appropriate expectations and educate people about what we mean by proficiency and how that looks at different proficiency levels. I said I would show you the oral proficiency levels in the workplace tool because I think that's one that gets used quite a bit. It's kind of nice because it clearly outlines the different actual proficiency levels, and it quickly shows what language functions or what students can do with the language. It has corresponding professions and positions where you could use that level of language in your job, in your role. And then it has examples of what kind of students are likely to function in this level. Since you've already seen the proficiency outcome charts and you know that for our K-12 programs, it's novice low through advanced mid, we'll take a quick look at that. I'd like you to start at the bottom. When we talk about novice proficiency, whether it's novice low, mid, or high, notice that we're talking about students who can communicate minimally with basically lists, words, and phrases. Sometimes this is referred to as the parrot stage because students can parrot back to you or repeat back to you what they've learned in a language. Notice too that this is language learners on the right-hand side that are in grades K through 6 or maybe following 2 years of high school language study. And if you look at our outcomes and our state standards, you'll see that it falls right in line with that. Moving up into intermediate, low, mid, and high, you see that at that level, students can create with language that initiate and maintain and bring to a close simple conversations and ask and answer simple questions. Now, we do need to distinguish between proficiency and performance because proficiency, as described here, is what students can do with the language, is what they can do independently outside of the classroom. Inside the classroom, of course, you're going to have them working on things so they can perform at higher levels of proficiency than they've actually attained. But when they're on their own, this is what they can do. Notice that when we talk about students who have intermediate levels of proficiency, we're getting to students who are continuing to follow things like an immersion program from K-6 or language learners after they've taken about 4 years in a high school sequence or a high school credit sequence, or perhaps 2 semesters of a college sequence. We don't get to a point where students can use their language in a role, even in a very basic role like a receptionist or cashier, until we get to intermediate mid. And so this is a tool that I know is often used with the administrator guides as a way to think about how students build proficiency to the point that it can be useful in careers and work in our world. All right. So those are some things to think about with appropriate expectations. So let's pause for a moment and ask another question. Which emphasized section that we've just talked about as the Administrator Guide for Modern Language Programs are you going to use or share first? You've been sitting quietly listening to this. I hope you've been thinking about why feedback might have said these different components, the description from the Administrator Guide, the exit proficiency expectations, the in modern language classroom or appropriate expectations, why those particular sections people felt school counselors and principals and teacher supervisors needed more information on. But for you personally, which of these emphasized sections are you going to use or share first with someone? And this, by the way, is not a check all that apply, because I really want you to drill down and think about which one are you going to emphasize. So I'll go ahead and launch that, and you can put in your responses. All right, let's finish up voting. 10 more seconds. All right, thank you. I will go ahead and close and then share that out. Great. It looks like 38% of you said you're going to share the appropriate expectations section that was emphasized. Almost the same number, 35% said you're going to share the exit proficiency expectations. 18% said you're going to focus on the in the modern language classroom section. And 10% said you're going to look at that description section. Great, thank you. So let's talk about that a little more. How will you use or share the emphasized section of the Administrator Guide for Modern Language Programs that you just noted? I want you to type your answer into the questions box to be shared aloud. And then, depending on what you want to do, you can raise your e-hand and I'll unmute you to share it aloud yourself. Or you can finish your information in the questions box with you share, meaning for me, the presenter, to do that, if you don't have a microphone or you prefer just to text your information in. So I'll go ahead and pause. Please answer that question. How will you use or share the emphasized section of the Administrator Guide for Modern Language Programs that you just indicated in our poll question? All right, I'm seeing one person and she didn't raise her hand, so I'm assuming she wants me to just go ahead and share it. Emily said she will share with the guidance department the description section to help with course description text that goes out in course catalogs. That's a great idea. And it's also something to know that in our unpacking documents, we actually have course descriptions that you can use or adapt for your programs. So those are already there and that might be helpful to you as well. Amy says it's also important for students to know what they will be expected to do by the end of the course. So she would share those exit proficiency expectations actually with students, not just administrators or school counselors. That's a good point too. It's good for your students to know where they're going and why. And often sharing our exit proficiency expectations answers the question of why are we learning this quite naturally without students even having to ask. All right. Carrie said, again, she will also share with students so they know what to expect after 2 semesters, because sometimes people don't always have a good frame of reference as to what they can do with language after only 2 semesters or 2 courses in a language. You often hear people talk about being fluent, but we know we really need to talk about levels of proficiency and what you can do. Mary said she will meet with the other world language teachers during their PLC time to share different sections of this administrator guide for them. That's a good idea too, to share with your colleagues what you're learning here and maybe how you can use that together. Rufino says that he will use the administrator guide sections to adjust and assess his own expectations for students as he's teaching. Magda said she would like to help administrators and school counselors to have appropriate expectations, so she's going to share that section with them specifically. Also, Mary, a different Mary, we've got several on the line today, said that she thinks this is good information for all stakeholders to have. And that's a very good point. The administrator guides are in fact designed to be very straightforward and to be a quick summary of what our state standards look like and what we mean by building proficiency in language. So we hopefully think that everyone can use those to better understand world language programs. Lisa noted that she would provide the professional development review framework with an instructional coach so that they can use that information from the administrator guides. Roger noted he plans to share with students and with administrators, as the topic comes up, what proficiency levels are expected. So those exit proficiency expectations are critical. And he said some students and others might wonder why they don't, quote, know Spanish, unquote, once they've only taken one course. So he wants them to be able to talk more about that and really understand what a long sequence of instruction can do in building language proficiency. Lisa noted that she thinks it would be important to discuss expectations within her department to make sure everyone's on the same page, especially when you teach, quote, after each other. And that's very true. When you think about that sequence of levels, you know that in teaching assignments, sometimes you're assigned a level like level 2 or level 3, you're getting students from another teacher. And if you're all in sync with each other with those expectations and your state standards and curriculum planning based on the standards, you should be able to help your students the best. Anna noted that she's going to share this information with both the guidance department and administration so that they know specifically how language teaching has evolved in the modern language classroom. And again, it's good to educate others so that they know how things have changed. Thank you so much for all of your comments. I can't read them all, but it sounds like you have excellent ideas on how to share this information from the administrator guides and really use that to build your programs and help others understand what building proficiency in a language really means for students. So let's kind of look at what you might be able to do in creating professional development, and specifically a PD activity, and choosing classroom video for use with our NCDPI Standards Administrator Feedback Tool that's part of the Administrator Guide. One of the things that was first noticed about these Administrator Guides, and it was kind of designed this way, was you could take this Administrator Guides and literally use them in training for principals and other educators that you're working with so that they could use this in evaluating you as a teacher, but in helping you build your practices. And specifically, this administrator feedback tool, and it's pictured there in the right-hand corner, but it's the last 2 pages of the administrator guide. And by the way, the administrator feedback tool is the same in all 3 administrator guides. So it doesn't matter which one you pick up, you get the same tool. One of the things that was mentioned early on as a PD activity was, in fact, to create some kind of activity where administrators would use the feedback tool as though they were observing a classroom, and they'd actually be observing a world language classroom from a video. And so I want to share with you today some resources about that and some ideas, and to get you thinking about a PD activity you could create and choose a classroom video to go with it to use with this tool. So just briefly, I want to look at our NCDPI Standards Administrator Feedback Tool for World Language Teachers, which is what this is called, in the back of our administrator guides. One thing I have to emphasize with you is that this does not ever replace the feedback information that principals have to fill out with teachers in the NCDPI system. This is just a tool they could use with it, but it is not a checklist they have to use. We want them to have materials available that will help, but not add additional requirements. But it has been designed so that the underlying wording in each standard, standards 1 through 5, is taken directly from those NCDPI materials that they're very familiar with and have been trained on to give feedback to teachers. It has a place at the top, like you see there on the screen, where they list the teacher's name, the date, the time or the period, class period that they were working in, and then the program or course. And then they have to indicate the language, the alphabetic language, the logographic language, and or the visual language. This helps educate administrators and others as well on what types of programs we have, as well as what languages are taught in each program. When we think about creating a PD activity, there are several things that come to mind when we think about the practical, logistical side of it. First, of course, we need to think about who's our target audience. So I want you to pause a minute and really let yourself explore this idea about creating a PD activity. So if you were creating a PD activity, would your target audience be a principal or a teacher supervisor? Would it be another teacher, maybe a department head, a mentor, a peer, or even for yourself? You could use this for self-assessment too. Would it be a curriculum coordinator, like from the district level or the school level? Or might there be other educators who could be your target audience? So when you're thinking about a PD activity, I want you to pick just one target audience. And maybe it's just one person or just one group of people. Also, I want you to think about the amount of time that you have with them. It's always a big question, right? How much time do we have available to do what we need to do? Is it something where you're going to be presenting the administrator guide or this PD activity briefly, maybe 10 to 20 minutes? Is it something where you'll have them for a whole hour, let's say? How will that time be structured, and where does it fall with the rest of things? I know we're coming up right now on the holidays, and there's often going to be in-service days where we're doing PD activities together with other colleagues. Think about the timing. Is it coming right before grades are due? Is it coming at the same time as the start of another semester or something like that? Or how is that time frame working? What method will you use for your PD activity that you're brainstorming about? Will you be able to do something face-to-face, online, or in a blended format that combines face-to-face and online? Also, will you have a small group, a medium-sized group, a large group? Maybe you'll only have one individual or two. Maybe you'll have a whole group, and maybe there'll be a mixed group of, let's say, principals or school counselors or something else. And so what method will you have? And then what prep work and follow-up will you do? One of the things that is always a concern when we do PD activities is that it's not a one-shot opportunity, that there's some kind of preparation or hopefully some kind of follow-up work that participants do to deepen their learning and understanding. So here are some ideas for prep work or even follow-up work that you might be thinking about. Would you have them, for example, read the administrator guide pages 1 and 2 before they do this activity with pages 3 and 4? Would you incorporate that administrator guide as part of the PD? Would you have them do prep work or follow-up work with their department or in some kind of school workshop? Would you have them do prep work or follow-up in a meeting with each other, with other language teachers or something like that? Would you do online sharing or even an online course for the prep work or the follow-up? Would you make this part of what they're thinking about with their walkthroughs? Many principals and other administrators do classroom walkthroughs that are very informal. Could they use this PD activity and what they learn from it as they do walkthroughs? Or you might have other ideas of what would work well for the target audience you have in mind. Next, because this has been a popular activity, one of the things people like to do with our NCDPI standards tool there is to choose a classroom video so that administrators or the people doing the PD get the experience of really looking at a world language classroom, and not necessarily one that they will be evaluating, but in fact a different world language classroom, so that they can be more objective and start to use the tool and that checklist effectively. So then we need to think about, for our PD activity, what classroom video can we choose? We, of course, could choose a locally recorded video, maybe self-recorded by a teacher, maybe recorded by a mentor observing a classroom, maybe recorded by a peer, a colleague who came in to observe, whether they were a world language teacher or some other teacher. You might also have classroom videos of yourself or your other teachers available in a professional library or even online. I always like to share resources with you, and so one that I want to share with you today is about choosing a classroom video. Some of you may be familiar with the Annenberg Learner website. They have a whole catalog of classroom videos for world language teachers. It's free, and it's at the website you see there, learner.org/library/TFL, teaching foreign languages, /index.html. I like this because it is in fact a free resource, but it's also a one with a great deal of variety. There are 35 videos to choose from in 9 different languages. And though it doesn't have all 18 languages that we have in North Carolina, it has about half of them with 9. It also has a video organizer chart, so you can sort through the videos to target them for specific types of PD. So for example, they have the video organizer charts. You can sort by grade level and grade span. You can also sort by proficiency performance range to look at novice, intermediate, or advanced. You can sort by the national standards, our 5 Cs, which are aligned to our state standards, of course, and our strands. And it has them so you can sort by key teaching strategies. So let's take a closer look at this, the Annenberg Learner materials, because I want to look at the video organizer chart and also have you think about what might be a good classroom video to choose and why. So I included this slide you see here just in case our technology broke down or you needed it for your own training if you're going to use these slides. But if we go out to the Annenberg Learner site, you can see there the 9 different languages and so forth. And what I emphasized on the slide was these overview videos. And I'll make this a little bigger so we can see it. Where there's an introduction to the library, there's standards in the 5 Cs, so a video on that. There's a video on assessment strategies. And then also there's this video organizer chart. So if we click on that, it brings it up. And you can see that you can sort through the videos by grade level. And so you see that there's the lesson title, the instructor, the language, and then elementary, middle school, and high school, but also the specific grades within each grade span. So if we were looking for something in particular to kind of align it to what you offer in your school or district, you could probably find something. There's also the videos sorted by performance range, so that novice, intermediate, and then intermediate high to advanced low. So you can go through and see that. There's one sorted by the 5 Cs, so our communication modes is first, cultures as well as the things we have with strands, connections, comparisons, and communities. And then also by key teaching strategies. So you can take a look at those and really sort through and pick a video. Most people like to pick a classroom video of a language that they don't offer or that they know the PD participants don't speak, because then they're really in a world where they don't understand the language and they need to focus on the teaching strategies that they see in front of them. And that's always key when we think about world language best practices. Regardless of which language you teach, are you implementing best practices so that students are building proficiency? So that's what's there in that video organizer chart to help you choose a classroom video if you want from the Annenberg collection. I am noticing our time. And so what I want you to do is to take this activity here and think about it. And if you want, email me back, but just continue to develop your idea for a PD activity. So if we had time, I would ask you to share, like we did before, what kind of activity and classroom video would you use in PD for the NCDPI Standards Administrator Feedback Tool? What do you think would be a good pairing for your work if you wanted to share that feedback tool that's in the administrator guides, and really get an administrator to focus on using it by watching a classroom video that would be the best one, in your opinion, for the kind of training you want to do. So that's what I wanted to share with you today about our Modern Language Programs Administrator Guide. I'll go ahead and finish up with our reminders and resources so that we can finish out for today. I always want to remind you that our World Language webinar series is available to all. It's also always on Wednesdays from 4 to 5 p.m. like we're doing today. In the middle of the screen, you see our World Language Best Practices series. So we finished that one. That's why it's grayed out for December 11th. On February 19th, we'll be focusing on the Dual and Heritage Administrator Guide. And on April 22nd, we'll be focusing on the Classical Language Administrator Guide. There's actually some other things we're going to do based on the feedback we received on the October 16th broadcast with this, including some things like putting together some of the PD ideas we've had over time and that might get shared back from our broadcast today, as well as creating tools like a quick podcast, maybe that principals or administrators could use to better understand the administrator guides. We also have our DPI World Language Quarterly Updates webinar series. One of those was just broadcast on November 13th, so not too long ago, about a month. The next one is January 22nd. And the final one for the year will be March 18th. On the right-hand side, our Linguafolio for North Carolina in 2019-2020, those broadcasts are done. And do keep in mind that the link on the screen will take you out to our World Language webinar information page, and all of the archives from these broadcasts, including one from today, will be posted there so that you can access the information and use it. Also, I didn't want to forget to mention that we have other upcoming professional development. I do keep a K20 PD list on our website. If you click on that link or the link in the notes, you'll go directly to that. It lists things coming up chronologically. One of the things that's coming up is actually a webinar on Tuesdays instead of a Wednesday. And it's going to be on our class of 2019 and their information about the Seal by Literacy, our Global Languages endorsement. We're going to look at their data in details and see where we are with that as a state. That one's being done on Tuesday because it's in collaboration with my colleagues from the English Language Arts and Languages section that World Languages is a part of. So we'll incorporate English Language Arts and ESL, English as a Second Language. You can always get information about our state sealed by literacy by going to bit.ly/NCSealGLE there on the slide. That takes you to the page on our website that has the most information about that, and will include information for all the years that our students have been able to earn the sealed by literacy since the class of 2015. Also, don't forget the Flank Spring Conference, the Foreign Language Association North Carolina Conference is coming up soon. It will be in March. It's on a Saturday in March, and it includes the Flank presentations, the top 10 from the Flank Fall Conference, as well as sessions that are specific to dual language immersion teachers and administrators. So you see information about that. Look for details soon about that. We also have a number of world language listservs that I would encourage you to be on if you're not already. We have one for dual language immersion educators, one for NC Linguafolio, one for world language instructors K20, which is where the webinar series is most often advertised, and then also the World Language Education News, which is available to everyone. There are other DPI listservs, such as ones for charter schools, global education, legislative updates, teachers of English learners, all of that. And you're welcome to go to bit.ly/NCDPI updates to sign up for any that you would like to receive information from. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, you can contact me. I'm Anne-Marie Gunter, as I said, your World Languages consultant. I've got both my phone number and email. I would encourage you to use email. You can also connect with us on the NCDPI World Languages Facebook page, and always go to the website to get information and see where things are posted that you can use locally. I do thank you for joining us today. I hope you've gotten some information you can use and think more deeply about in your work as a world language educator.